Well, that's a quite a first day on the job for poor Dr. Al-Hashimi. My God, poor woman.
It's intense. It's really intense. Yeah, first days are always intimidating and rough, but I don't think she could have predicted how rough it would get.
What was it like, just to take a step back for you joining the set of this show in second season?
As actors, there are certain things that we get for free, and then there are things that we have to work for. Obviously, I had to work for the medicine. I had no knowledge of what it meant or what it would take or any of the information that I learned from my research process and from our medical advisors and from all the doctors and everything that I spoke to. But the stuff that I did get for free was I was showing up on my first day. It's a well-established culture, this almost living organism, right? This ecosystem that is moving and it's flawed, but it's running itself. And I was a new character. I was the only new main character coming into the world, both in the world of fiction and the real world. And so I took all of her nerves and anxiety and all of that, and I used it. I used it as an actor, I used it as the character. And it's not that you don't feel these things, it's how you relate to these feelings, both as the actor and the character. And as the actor, I have a pretty good knock on wood relationship with fear and maybe not anxiety, but I know how to make friends with my fear and use it because it's really just is a surge of energy and abundance of feeling. And when you have someplace to put that energy and focus, which is the work in this case, I feel pretty good. I feel confident. I really throw myself into any role that I'm doing, any project I'm working on. So I had done rigorous prep. And Dr. Al-Hashimi has had the same experience. I mean, she's prepped herself, she's done her homework, she knows what she's walking into. So in ways, we're walking on parallel paths. And that made it kind of easier because it's like it's not that she doesn't feel that anxiety and fear and am I going to fuck up? Are they going to want to get rid of me? Everyone feels that, right? But it's just a matter of how you relate to it and sinking into your own expert area of expertise and confidence and all that. So we were relying on the goods that we're bringing in with us.
Look, it's always hard coming in someplace new, especially when you're coming in as the boss.
Yes.
But I really admired her confidence. She really has quiet confidence. And even
Yeah.
there was a patient where she treated and she did this crazy procedure. And at the end of the time, the procedure, they said, "How many times have you done it?" And she said, "Never. I just saw it done once before."
Yeah.
I mean, that was sort of amazing. Was that on the page for you, or was that something you developed yourself?
That procedure was crazy because I talked to a lot of doctors, and many of them hadn't had to do that procedure. And that's like a last resort procedure. If you can't get an airway, and the child is, I think it's 8 years old and younger, so it's a last resort procedure. And one of my friends, actually, his brother, is a surgeon who loves practicing this procedure because it's satisfying on many levels to him. Number one being saving a kid's life. But yeah, I think that procedure represents so much of her character, really. It's like she is ready for anything, and her level of preparation, her level of competence is just through the roof. And so throw anything at her and she is ready because she has studied it inside out. In the beginning of the show, you see how she doesn't really understand personal space with Dr. Robbie, and she's kind of gets her nose in there, and that's really because she feels she's so absorbed in everything that she does and wants to get in there head first and see it from all different angles. And that's been her approach to medicine and her approach in her life with everything that she does. And so that procedure was kind of revealing in how she delivers such, an expert level of obviously this is something that's really challenging, really difficult that not all doctors do. And it doesn't rely on the years and years she's had practicing it. So yeah, I really loved that moment. And it was written in the script that it was her first time delivering it, but it was important for me to play against her nerves. And I think there's a moment in the beginning where you see her breathe, get herself collected in order to start. But once she's in, she's in. She's practiced this in her head in the sim lab, but in her head thousands of times. And one of the resources that I used actually was kind of a guided visualization of the procedure that gave you like mantras and a step by step of what happens and kept reiterating the step that came before. And it's kind of, it sounds like a guided meditation, but
Hmm.
it's talking, you through, it's talking the person through the procedure. So I listened to that over and over and over again. And in life, we're always hiding. We're always covering up how we really feel, especially in professional environments. We don't, if we're always walking around playing our cards, then we'll be like little babies. We'll be like little kids. So of
Right.
course that's a moment that represents so much about this person that she's, of course there's the fear, but she's a pro and she can do anything.
She really has to prove herself because she's replacing somebody who's beloved, and we learn that he's having his own drama too.
Yeah.
We also learned that she's been keeping this secret. When did you find out that she was going to be keeping the secret? How long had you known?
I learned in the last stage of the audition process. I I had an initial self-tape that went into the callback, which was over Zoom, and then they flew me to LA from New York for a test and a chemistry read with Noah. And at each step of the process, they added a scene. And so there was a scene about her condition, having temporal lobe epilepsy, in the last phase, so the test process. And the scene was very different from what we saw on episode 15. It was kind of like an expositional, very casual conversation between her and Dr. Robbie. And then when I read episode one, when I was cast and I read the first episode, I was 99.9% sure that that's why that episode ends with her staring at the baby. But I confirmed with the writers and with Scott and John and Noah, and they said, yes, this is what we're playing with. And at some point later in the season, probably at the end, we'll have a reveal. So I knew that there would be a big reveal, and it was just about working my way backwards from there. Because it's subtle, and the
Mhm.
condition is subtle, and you don't want to play the drama. I love the fact that it stirred so much conversation and speculation of people being like, I think it's her kid. I think baby Jane Doe is her kid, or I think she's had trauma from the war zones she's worked in, and all these different theories. And I love that because it's this moment where we're so divided and we're stuck behind our screens, and it's this opportunity to create and stir speculation and conversation and different people expressing their different POVs. And I think that's really satisfying for me as the actor. But yeah, subtlety was key for that
For
because
sure.
you can't you don't want the audience to know. And the condition itself, like all of the throughout my research process, talking to epileptologists and different doctors who have treated kids with absence seizures, which show up similar to the temporal lobe seizures. It's something that is pretty much undetectable unless you know that's what's happening to the person. And there was a moment in episode 7 where she feels it coming up, what's called an aura, where it feels almost like a deja vu. Some people report tasting metal in their mouth. So there's this moment that Uta captured before I excuse myself in talking to Jackson Davis's parents, and I go to the bathroom and call my neurologist, where I feel something coming up, which is why I leave. All these little things are so fun as the actor because you explore them so fully and then you hide them. And that's what we
Hmm.
do in life.
Sure.
It takes a lot for us to blow up and to to fully emote in the ways that we want or feel, especially in professional environments, which is what makes the last episode and her having, so putting her guard down and revealing more of herself, so satisfying because you kept it bottled up for so long, and that is so hard to play, to not show and be very strategic about how you present yourself and how people see you, control how people see you.
Why do you think she decided to confide in Dr. Robbie? I mean, they'd really been at, loggerheads the whole episode. She'd been trying to find a relationship with him. He's going through his own PTSD journey, whatever that is. He'd been kind of going after women, especially the whole episode, as we've seen. It's interesting that she did open up to him, but, she comes at it from the professional point of view. But why, from your perspective, why do you think she confided in him?
There are a couple of reasons. Number one, she hasn't had a seizure for a couple years now. This hasn't happened. It's not, there's a very detailed answer, but I'll spare you all the details that basically she's tried a bunch of different treatments, and whether it's, after a week they failed or after 11 years with the ablation therapy, which is basically a laser that targets the scar tissue on your brain, on your temporal lobe, and destroys it. And this is the part of the brain that causes the seizures. So that worked for a long extended period of time, and then they started up again because our bodies are so smart. They know how to change and morph. And in this case, the seizures came back, and so she's feeling rattled, destabilized, confused, and she can't get in touch with her neurologist. Despite their differences, she recognizes Dr. Robbie's talent, his skill, his rigor, his breadth of experience and knowledge, and admires that in him. They speak the same language of medicine, but they're different dialects. And
Mm-hmm.
so she presents this case to him in part because she wants his medical expertise. She sees him seeing her, and she's not used to being seen. She sees him too. So there's this strange alternate reality where I think these two characters could be, running the best hospital in the country, because that friction is actually quite generative, and that's how new forms are created. And they could be a dream team, but I think ego gets in the way, particularly from Dr. Robbie's point of view. But she takes this to him because she genuinely wants his medical opinion, his advice. More than that, I think she takes this to him because they've spent the entire day butting heads. It seems like they're at an impasse on a personal level. And I think it's an attempt to reveal part of herself to get closer to him.
Mm-hmm.
She sees, like I said, he sees her and she sees him. He sees her and asks her questions like, what was going on in the patient? Did you have a second? Were you questioning yourself? Was you second guessing something? And she's hiding, she hides from him and brushes him off and says, no, no, no. And that's out of character for her because she's not somebody who dodges responsibility or tries, shies away from accountability. And she sees that she's having the response of a little girl in this moment. And then an hour and a half later, however long later, she remembers the woman she is and goes to him and decides to reveal part of herself in order to get closer to him and share these wounded parts of herself, and in hopes of appealing to the wounded parts in him, and that maybe this is a meeting point for us. And his response is a nightmare. It's a
Yeah, it's not the reaction she wanted, is it?
no,
No.
certainly not. Certainly not. But it makes for good drama. It's really sad, because it's everything I think that she's feared in her life. Ever since this started at 5, is if people really see me, then they'll know how incapable I am. They'll know how incompetent I am. They'll know how unlovable I am. All these things that every person has, like these wounds, these scar tissue, emotional scar tissue from our youth of like, something happens to us, and we carry this as if it's a truth throughout our lives, and we spend our lives like guarding this wound, and then it hardens and calcifies, and then it becomes a truth, and then we find all reasons for why it's true, right? And in this moment, she spent her life thinking that if I reveal myself, then, to put it simply, I won't be accepted and I won't be lovable and I'll lose everything I've worked so hard for. And he is proving her right.
I think it's sort of she's catching him in such a bad moment.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't, it's
totally.
sort of hard, it's hard to know like what she knows about the day that he's had. Like she doesn't know about what happened with Dana and
Totally.
catching that, he's spiraling about Langdon, he's spiraling about Duke. I'm not making any excuses
No,
for
no,
him at
no, but it's
all.
true. It's true. Yeah.
And so it's sort of like it's hitting him at the sum total of this day. Where does she go from here?
I think it's important to, yeah, I just want to acknowledge what you just said, because I think that something the Pit does beautifully is it's sort of an exploration of compassion, really,
Hmm.
because we often jump to, and we see these characters jump to conclusions with each other. And as the audience, we have more time with them in tighter shots where we get to really see what's happening beneath their eyes, in their minds, where other characters don't. They see them from across the hospital, or they see them in a trauma room, and so it's important to remember not to take everything personally, but it's really
Right.
hard when the stakes are so high. And there was a line that he had at the top of 15. I think they cut it, where he made a joke after Dr. Al-Hashimi revealed all of this to him, and she's just shocked, and he said, "Sorry, I've had a really bad day." And she says, "Haven't we all?" And I
Mm.
love that moment. I love that exchange, because he's right. He's had a real fucking horrible day. So has she. And we've seen all of them have like horrible, horrible
Hmm.
experiences throughout the day. And it's just a reminder for all of us that we're always carrying something. All of us have,
For
you
sure.
know, we're all, and I love that. I love that part of the Pit, that it humanizes every struggle and every bad behavior and every judgment that we have. It sort of dismantles it and humanizes it. But to answer your question about where does she go from here, um, there's this saying that I try to live by. I'll let it spoil my dinner, but not my breakfast, or I'll let it spoil my breakfast, but not my dinner. I think in this case, she's gonna let it spoil her week, because this is pretty heavy. And again, it goes back to not only what it reveals about herself and her story about her condition, but just this impossible system, this impossible medical industrial complex, the healthcare system, which is unraveling. I hate to be vague here, but sexism and patriarchy, that
That's
like,
where I was going to go.
this moment of like, you didn't report Langdon for a felony,
Exactly.
and I've gotten from a professional, medical professional, a neurologist, the okay to work with double coverage. And double coverage, by the way, is the norm. There's usually more than one attending at hospitals. And so for him to say, nope, you're gone, is like, who is this helping? I've shown myself and I've proven myself all day, regardless of whether or not you like me. You see where I'm coming from. You see the quality of care I deliver, and how much I care about our residents, how much, the being in this position of leadership, not just for the hospital and the patients, but for our residents. You've seen me in action, and yet you want to take it all away from me. So I think this will affect her moving forward. I don't know how they're writing the next season. I don't know what's happening, but I know that for me, living inside of this character, it's definitely going to trigger some trust issues. And it's going to affect how she's ever able to respect Dr. Robbie, not only for how he's handled her, but how he handled the whole Langdon situation.
For sure. I mean, that's been a big conversation. I don't know how much you engage in the commentary about the season, but a lot of people are noticing like again, he's having his own issues and he's dealing with his own issues, but he seems to be targeting women and especially brown women this season. And
Yeah.
it's hard to watch.
Hats off to the writers for going there with this, but I think a lot of this is just unexamined biases that we all
Mhm.
carry. I mean, we haven't gone into AI yet, but one of the dangers of AI is algorithmic biases. There are a lot of benefits, as I hear from healthcare workers and as I've read across journals, and I read this book, Deep Medicine by Eric Topol. But the point is, there are ways in which we can use this for the betterment of medicine, but there are a lot of dangers. It's a slippery slope. And we can't even get over our own human biases. And algorithms are designed by what is available of humanity. So if you're scraping the internet and you are collecting data from what human beings have put out there, then it's going to contain these like unexamined biases that exist, whether it's about women or ethnic minorities or minority groups in general, marginalized communities, power, who deserves care, how they deserve it. And so I think that Robbie is suffering from a little bit of that, is his own sort of old school way of relating and giving tough love, and maybe knowing that women in medicine have it harder and trying to make them step up to, in a way that's very kind of old school. And like, I come from an opera background. I would hear stories even before my time of the way that teachers were like this very harsh. And I myself had a teacher that was similar to like Whiplash, that movie
Mhm.
where
Right.
it's tough love. You want to get better, you really want this, then grow the fuck up and step the fuck up or get out. If you can't do better than everyone else, then leave. So I think that there's some of that in Dr. Robbie too, of maybe the abuse that he got from his mentors, and how that abuse translates to his teaching style or methodology or the way that he relates. And unfortunately, women have been the on the other end of it this season.
Do you think he goes on his sabbatical? Do you think he comes back from his sabbatical?
I don't know. I don't know. I think there's a world where he goes on his sabbatical and cuts it short because he's racked with guilt. I think something turned in him, and there was something about his feeling like this resolution in him of maybe he's lost his way, he's lost his path, and he's willing to give it all up. And I think that I haven't watched the scene with the baby yet, but I think something about that scene signals that it's a bit of a death and a rebirth, maybe. That there's something inside of him that has died this season. And we thought maybe it would be him taking his own life, but something is also reborn. And that's what baby Jane Doe represents, is this new beginning that we don't know where we came from. We don't know where we're going, but that is the cycle and pattern of life and this universe, really. It's just constant cycles of death and rebirth. For as long as we can stay human on this planet, we will constantly be going through this within our own lives.
What do you want for Dr. Al-Hashimi? I mean, she has that great big cry in the car, and there's nothing like a good cathartic cry.
Especially when you're sipping it up. Yeah, for so long.
I know she's been holding it together, and I feel for her because she doesn't really have any allies. I mean, we know everyone in the ER are her friends, and we know kind of like who their friendships are and who their allies are. But this is her first day. She hasn't built those allies yet.
Yeah, I mean, there is Dr. Mel King and Dr. Samira Mohan. They have that pre-existing relationship and connection from the VA. Dr. Abbott, they click right away.
Mhm.
But there was a piece of that car scene that was actually, I learned, was cut. I think it will probably, I haven't seen it yet, but I'm sure it'll play just as powerfully. But it was this well, it will play just as powerfully without it. But it was a moment where she drives and she stops, and she makes a decision to call her ex-husband. She calls her ex-husband and says, "Hey, can you watch our son tonight? I'm having some car trouble." And he says, "Sure, what's going on?" She says, "Nothing. I'm just dealing with it now. I'm just getting off work. Just some car trouble." And he says, "Are you okay? Do you want me to come pick you up?" And that moment of that gesture, that like the way he extends himself and that kindness is exactly what she needs in this moment. And that was when she starts to crumble, and she quickly gets off the phone with him so he can't hear it, and then has her breakdown. But I think that moment also taught me a lot about where she is, that she needs to be alone and go through this right now, because this hasn't only triggered her own trauma from her life in this condition, it's also triggered her relationship to trust. And and I think that she needs to spend some time working on herself and her worthiness outside of achievements and work. And because I think that in that moment she goes back to this feeling she's always had, always housed, of being worthless. If I can't do this, then I mean nothing. I have no purpose. And so many of us who are workaholics and, job obsessed, and spend our lives distracting ourselves from ourselves, really, through work. I think she has to confront that, and find her own self-worth outside of her her expertise and her identity as a doctor. So I think that there will be some inevitable soul searching, because she's not the kind that'll allow it to break her down completely. She has to find herself and reinvent herself in some way.
The Pitt always seems to come back on a season or a holiday or some sort of big moment. Do you have any ideas in mind of what you'd like to see for season three?
Oh, I haven't thought about that. Oh, maybe Labor Day. No, that would seem fitting. That we're supposed to take this time to acknowledge and rest and, honor our hard workers and our labor unions. And but I don't know, I haven't thought about that. I think whatever it is, whatever holiday it is, it's always just kind of the backdrop, and an excuse to explore these deeper issues that the pit tackles so beautifully, how it brings humanity and societal issues to the forefront, and explores human behavior and relationships and politics without trying, and society without judgment. Just we're seeing it through the lens of the hospital, and these brave, valiant healthcare professionals.